Intel's Arc graphics has been out for a good while now, and if you're still unsure if it's good or not, then join me as we both find out if the Intel Arc A750 is worth not hype, but the chance that it can be the savior that we sorely need. What's up guys, your boy Boss Mac back to gaming.com, and today we'll be talking about the Intel Arc A750. I'm not going to dive deep into the architecture of the Intel Arc graphics, but if you want to learn more about how Intel is building their first discrete GPU for the mainstream market, you can check out my coverage at backtogaming.com. The link is down in the description. In this video, I want to focus primarily on performance, expectations, and value as we talk about Intel Arc graphics. Right now, Intel has the Arc A380 right here, the Arc A750, the one we're reviewing today, and the high-end model, the Arc A770. It's worth noting that Intel is targeting the mainstream market, so they compete primarily with the Radeon RX 6600, 6600 XT, and the RTX 3050, and to some extent, the RTX 3050. While internationally, Intel sells their own brand models, here in the Philippines, ASRock is their only partner as of the publishing of this video. So for this review, we'll be using the ASRock Arc A750 Challenger graphics card for our test. This GPU is part of ASRock's mainstream Challenger series and features a 2-slot dual-fan cooler. It's currently their only series for Intel Arc graphics cards, which includes both the Arc A380, the Arc A750, and the Arc A770. Back to the ASRock Arc A750, this is also a factory overclock model with a 150 MHz clock bump on the GPU versus stock. How significant of an OC is that? It's not something we're covering in this video, but with the recent release of the third-party Arc OC tool, that's definitely something I would like to cover and something to look forward to, so make sure to follow us and subscribe when that drops. Coming in at around 16,900 pesos, the Intel Arc A750 competes directly with the RTX 3050 and the Radeon RX 6600. We only have an RTX 3050 in the lab, so we're putting in the RX 6650 XT to stand in for AMD's card. We'll be using our new Intel 13th Gen Core i9-3900K system with an Asus ROG Maximus C790 Hero motherboard running Kingston Fury DDR5 6400 memory. Big shout out to CapRameX, EOL Benchmarks, and OCCT for the benchmark software that we use. Now, before we dive into our benchmarks, these tests are done using Intel's updated drivers that provide a massive boost in DirectX 9 performance. So if you don't keep up with tech news and you saw those early reviews of the Intel Arc graphics cards, I'm happy to report and confirm Intel really did improve their DirectX 9 performance. Most evidently in CSGO, where our initial review saw the Arc A750 performance in the mid-100s, but now it handily beats the RTX 3050 at 1080p. In Dota 2, performance is fairly close between our test cards, with the Arc A750 scoring fairly well with 220 plus FPS on average, tying our results for the RTX 3050 and just shy of the Radeon RX 6650 XT. Rainbow Six Siege DirectX 11 mode, on the other hand, still suffers, and while the game does have a DirectX 11 version as the game's default mode, DirectX 11 will be what most players would choose. And performance is not good, with the Arc A750 dipping to only 187 frames per second on average versus 300 and 460 on the RTX 3050 and the Radeon RX 6650 XT respectively. Overwatch 2 and Valorant bring the Arc A750 back into contention and gives us competitive frame rates in both games versus the equally priced GeForce competitor. Jumping over to AAA games, we start off with benchmark sweetheart Cyberpunk 2077, which still continues the trend of the Arc A750, besting the GeForce RTX 3050 in modern games. Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered is one of the games that first came out with support for XESS, which suggests that they have at least a working relationship with Intel. That said, this is where we start our ray tracing test, but first, traditional raster performance sees Spider-Man running at 110 frames per second, just a touch above the Radeon RX 6650 XT. Now, enabling ray tracing really hurts performance, but adds realistic light behavior and other eye candy on games that support it. At its most perfect, ray tracing can really bring game visuals to life, but for now, we settle for reflections and shadows. In Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered, we have the Arc A750 coming out on top with only a 36% performance penalty when enabling ray tracing, dropping average frame rate from 100 to 70 FPS. The RTX 3050 takes a huge hit with 63% ray tracing performance penalty, and the Radeon, despite their reputation for performing poorly in ray trace games, still edges out the GeForce with an average of 56, which is still below the performance of the Arc A750. Cyberpunk 2077 with ray tracing turned on also shows that the Arc A750 performing better than our test cards with an average of 41 FPS, a 26% penalty from 56 FPS when ray tracing is turned off. Back to Spider-Man, we now get to see XESS in action, and while performance is admirable in terms of pure FPS, with the Arc A750 gaining a 19% boost in performance, the image quality is the one aspect worth noting. This footage is taken from the RTX 3050, side by side with the Arc graphics card. You will notice the subtle edge ghosting on Spider-Man. And speaking of Spider-Man, there is only a handful of other games that support XESS, including Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Death Stranding Director's Cut, and Gotham Knights. And while not technically a dig at Intel, it is worth saying that if Intel really wants to build more goodwill with gamers, then building their XESS games portfolio as aggressively as Nvidia did with DLSS is the key into making that happen. For now though, it would really help if they refine the AI model to increase image quality as performance is decent enough. Now, before we talk about power and cooling, I'd only touch on cooling because that's quite specific to this card. Other partners like Garnier in China or Intel's own reference cooler for the Arc A750 are probably not comparable to ASRock's A750. What's the same on all these cards is Intel's relatively hefty power requirement. The Arc A750 in our extended gameplay test draws an average of 212 watts of power. In comparison, the Radeon 6650 XT uses 191 watts of power, and the RTX 3050 crushes them both with only 129 watts of power. Looking at it from a performance per watt perspective, the Arc A750 hits a low 0.15 frames per second in this test, while the Radeon 6650 XT and the RTX 3050 score roughly the same at 0.22 frames per watt, give and take a few decimals. Temperatures on the other hand looks good for the Arc A750 with ASRock Challenger Pro Cooler keeping our card below 70 degrees Celsius during our game. This is consistent across other games with the ASRock Arc A750 Challenger averaging 63 degrees Celsius in all of our gaming tests. Nothing I've said so far has not been said already by any other reviewer who has reviewed the Intel Arc A750. The verdict has been quite unanimous that it is a decent card that rivals the RTX 3050 or even bested in unique cases like in Spider-Man Remastered, or even beat out the more expensive options as it was intended to do. But most Western reviewers will probably tell you that the Radeon RX 6600 would be the wiser option because of the cheaper $250 retail price or even lower. The reality in the Philippines is that for 2,000 peso more, the Arc A750 is the more decent choice performance-wise. And while the RTX 3050 is also a $249 card, according to Nvidia, Philippine retail sees the card at the same price or higher than the Arc A750. Given the performance advantage of the Arc A750 over the RTX 3050, the answer should be quite obvious. Well, not quite. Intel's Arc graphics are definitely a first generation product and there is a lot to improve on, but with a strong debut for XESS along with ray tracing performance, it builds a solid foundation where Intel can really develop on. Nvidia's claim to fame is their ecosystem and support for a wide array of application acceleration that brings their GPUs as more of a universal accelerator due to GeForce cards being so strong at many things outside of gaming. Fortunately, Intel had the foresight to preempt many of the moves that Nvidia and AMD would be doing. As of this video's publishing, the Intel Arc graphics cards are the only cards supporting AB1 encoding and decoding in their price range. Having been using the Arc A750 for more than 2 weeks now, for games that don't show weird graphical glitches, you'd never really fuss about this being an Intel graphics card. When the card works, it works. And while it's not getting high marks from me for performance, Intel has shown that they are capable of advancing performance through driver updates when possible. And this shows that Intel is actively improving what they can. At the end of the day, would I recommend the Intel Arc A750? If you just got into PC gaming and are more into games like Death Stranding or Spider-Man Remastered, or maybe newer esports games like Valorant, then the Arc A750 is a viable option. This is even made better by the fact that should support for XESS expand in the future and more games start benefiting from Intel's upscaling technology, then the increase in performance is certainly welcome. But just like AMD, ray tracing should be an option here rather than a deciding factor. But if you really enjoy ray tracing, Intel's Arc A750 does okay, especially with XESS in the mix. If you're a content creator or a streamer, AB1 support would be a game changer once it gets more widespread adoption, and Intel Arc definitely puts you one step closer to using the technology. Ultimately, the Intel Arc A750 would be the better value than an RX 6600 if you will be able to use its extra features. If not, it's still going to be the faster gaming card. Intel's Arc graphics cards are now available in the Philippines with the ASRock Arc A750 as well as the ASRock Arc A380 now available from major dealers. Visit Intel Philippines Facebook page for more information or join us at the Intel Community Philippines Facebook group to talk about Intel Arc and so much more. This has been your boy Boss Mac, back to gaming.com. If you want to see more videos like this one, don't forget to like the video, comment the video, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.